The newest Pokemon TCG expansion is upon us. Twilight Masquerade is due out May 24th, which means that pre-releases start in just a couple of weeks on May 11th. Twilight Masquerade is going to be comprised of Japan's Crimson Haze and Mask of Change sets. Mask of Change releases this Friday, April 26th in Japan, and we finally have all of the scans from that set so we can see what is going to be in our Twilight Masquerade set. I'm really stoked about this set as it's going to be the most recent expansion legal for the biggest tournament of the year, the North American International Championships. And there are some really cool and impactful cards on the way, like Palafin EX, Greninja EX, all of the various Ogerpon EX with their different masks, and the new Festival lead deck as well. I've gone through all of the scans and reviewed what I consider to be the most impactful cards from our upcoming set. I'm stoked to get to the review, but before we do, I want to take a minute to show off this new storage product from my sponsor Dragon Shield, the Fortress Card Drawers. This thing is amazing and completely changing the way that I store and organize my Pokemon cards. The new Fortress Card Drawers from Dragon Shield are a stylish and secure TCG storage option for your home. If you're anything like me, then you got a lot of Pokemon cards lying around. These drawers are exactly what I've been needing for my collection, since they stack your cards vertically to maximize storage efficiency, and they slide easily onto your bookshelf. The drawers are super sturdy and the framework is solid, which stores your cards upright and guards them against accidental falls. Each drawer can hold over 850 unsleeved cards, multiple deck boxes, or up to 17 cube shells. Head over to dragonshield.com and check out their latest storage products, which also include the new Sanctuary slipcase binder. Use code TRICKYGYM at checkout and you'll receive 5% off your order. Huge thanks to Dragon Shield for being a continued sponsor of Tricky Gym. Ariados from Twilight Masquerade has the Big Net ability, which makes it so that your opponent's active evolution Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 colorless more. And then its String Bind attack costs 1 grass energy and does 10 damage plus 30 more damage for each colorless in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So, if we're thinking of Ariados as a card that can maybe knock out Charizard EX in one hit, Charizard EX has a grass weakness and a retreat cost of 2. If you have 2 Ariados in play, you're going to make its retreat cost 4, and you'll only be doing 130 damage to Charizard. Times 2, 260, not a one-hit KO. If you have 3 Ariados in play, that means that you're going to be doing 160 damage to the Charizard. Times 2, 320, still not a one-hit KO. You need 4 Ariados in play in order to one-hit KO Charizard. And that is just not worth it. I guess you could play Ariados with Spidops EX. Spidops EX also increases the retreat cost of your opponent's active Pokemon. So you could play an Ariados Spidops deck where your sole purpose is to increase your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. And your main attacker could be Ariados, and you could have Spidops EX sitting on the bench. It would be pretty funny to have a board with multiple Spidops and Ariados, and to make your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost like 6. But ultimately, very unserious. This will never be a meta deck. Trust me. Iron Leaves is a new single prize grass attacker with 120 HP. It's a future Pokemon, so it gets all of the benefits of being a future Pokemon. And it has the Vengeful Edge attack, which costs a grass and 2 colorless energy. It does 100 damage plus 60 more damage if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's last turn. This is a really useful revenge attacker. Dealing 160 damage for 3 energy is solid, and hitting for grass weakness is also solid. I could see this card being splashed into Standard and Gym Leader Challenge decks. It's just a fine attacker. It may not make the cut in Lost Box decks, which is where I kind of see this card fitting in. Giratina V-Star decks are playing Iron Leaves EX, which is just a more mobile, flexible attacker. Lost Box decks are going to be playing your Roaring Moon EX to take those big one-hit KOs. But Iron Leaves is always an option. You could also play Iron Leaves in your Future Toolbox deck to help Iron Hands EX with its pretty sorry Charizard matchup. You could maybe pass energy back from Iron Hands EX to Iron Leaves with a Heavy Baton and then one-hit KO Charizard EX with a Future Booster Energy Capsule attached. Good card. Hits for a very relevant weakness right now. Poltchageist. It's got the Shadowy Concealment ability, which reads, as long as this Pokemon is on your bench, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks. So it's got a built-in bench barrier, which is always welcome for the little guys, especially when you only have 30 hit points. And then Poltchageist evolves into Sinistcha EX, a 240 hit point grass-type Stage 1 Pokemon with 2 attacks. Its first attack, Infusion Retribution, costs 1 colorless energy. You get to choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon for each basic grass energy in your discard pile. Then you shuffle those energy back into your deck. Matcha Splash costs a grass and a colorless energy and does 120 damage. You get to heal 30 damage from each of your Pokemon. This is just really bad, right? I mean, all these kinds of attacks that require you to put a ton of energy in your discard pile and then put them back into the deck and then put them back into the discard pile and then back into the deck. Those kinds of strategies always register as gimmicky to me. Famously, there was a Feraligatr from Neo Genesis that had this style of attack that was actually the best deck in format during its time, but these kinds of strategies have not been good ever since. It'd be a shame to talk about Sinistcha EX without talking about the single prize Sinistcha. It's got 70 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Cursed Droplets, costs 1 grass energy and allows you to place 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. And then its second attack, Matcha All Out, costs a grass energy and allows you to discard up to 3 basic grass energy cards from your Pokemon in play. And the attack does 70 damage for each card you discarded in this way. Maxing out at 210 damage, you have to discard 3 grass energy from your board in order to do that. You can accelerate grass energy into play with Gardenia's Vigor and the new Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, which allows you to attach basic grass energy from your hand and draw cards. So maybe there's some sort of deck where you can accelerate grass energy into play with Teal Dance and then discard the energy with Sinistcha and then put all of the energy back into your deck with Sinistcha EX. But if I'm being honest, that just doesn't sound like a very powerful deck to me. That deck just still sounds like trash. I'm going to be honest. It only does 210 damage. Who cares? And your board would have to have all of these weak Pokemon on it, like Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. It doesn't even counter Charizard. Sunflora's Sunshine Return attack does 60 damage for each fire energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. But Charizard's Infernal Rain ability accelerates up to 3 fire energy from their deck to their Pokemon in any way they like. And as soon as you put a Sunkern into play, a Charizard player will be like, maybe I'll only accelerate 2 energy at a time and not over-attach. And since they can always just put the extra energy into play every time they evolve into Charizard EX, Sunflora doesn't even accomplish what it sets out to do by countering Charizard. It doesn't even do that. It's just a bad card. It wouldn't be a fun new set without a fun new gimmick deck. Twilight Masquerade's gimmick is the Festival Lead deck. It features a bunch of Pokemon that interact with Festival Lead and the Festival Grounds Stadium. So we're going to kind of talk about all those Pokemon all at once right here. Thwackey has the Bang Bang Drum ability, which reads, once during your turn, if your active Pokemon has the Festival Lead ability, you may search your deck for a card and put it into your hand. That's great. A built-in consistency engine. All you have to have is a Pokemon with a Festival Lead ability in the active spot, and you get to search your deck for whatever card you want every turn of the game. Seems good. Rillaboom, unfortunately, is not all that great, so you're probably just going to keep this Thwackey online for its Bang Bang Drum ability. The first Festival Leader we're going to look at is Dipplin. The Festival Lead ability says that if Festival Grounds is in play, this Pokemon may use its attack twice. If the first attack knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon, you can attack again after your opponent chooses a new active Pokemon. Dipplin has the Do the Wave attack, which does 20 damage for each of your benched Pokemon. A callback to Wigglytuff from the Jungle set. This Do the Wave attack is much stronger than Wigglytuff's. It can do up to 100 damage if you have a full bench. Times 2 because you're attacking twice, which means that you can do 200 damage. If you're attacking a Charizard EX, you get to do 200 damage twice because of Charizard EX's weakness. So this is a very nice attacker to have in your single prize toolbox deck. Being able to one-hit KO Charizard EX easily for just 1 energy is a huge buff, because with any single prize deck, knocking out the 330 hit point behemoth that is Charizard EX is always going to be something that you need to know how to do. And Dipplin, fortunately, solves that right away. Let's look at the other Festival Leaders. There's also Goldeen with the Festival Lead ability. Its attack Whirlpool costs 2 colorless energy and does 10 damage. You get to flip a coin. If heads, discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. This is interesting, and I think that Goldeen, being a single prize attacker that can attack for just 1 double turbo energy, could be useful in control decks. If you want to strip energy away from your opponent's active Pokemon, Goldeen could be useful for that. You effectively get to play 2 Crushing Hammer and have an option to remove 2 energy from your opponent's active with its attack. It's not the strongest attack. This does remind me of the Seeking, which had a 1 energy attack. You got to flip 3 coins and discard an energy for each heads you flipped. Goldeen only gets to flip 2 coins. It's not as good as the Seeking card that came before it, but it is a basic, so it does have that going for it. Swirlix can also attack twice. It's got 50 hit points and the Sneaky Placement attack, which places 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So you could place 2 damage counters on 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. All of these Festival Leaders seem very tame compared to the Dipplin. The Dipplin seems like far and away the strongest one that I've seen so far, right? Like all these Festival Leaders seem pretty bad compared to, to the one. And then the Festival Grounds Stadium makes it so that all Pokemon in play that have energy attached to them can't be affected by special conditions. It's kind of a funny stadium to go with the Festival Lead deck. It doesn't really seem like it would come into play that often, considering, your Pokemon only have like 50 hit points. So who really cares if they're affected by special conditions? I guess it's nice that your Goldeen can't be poisoned. But if I'm being honest, that just really wouldn't come up that often when you're playing standard format. Dipplin seems like the best Festival Leader, and Thwackey is obviously a great consistency option for the deck. There's a new grass item card as well that helps get grass Pokemon into play, so I could certainly see a Thwackey Dipplin deck being a relatively strong single prize deck that has a great Charizard matchup. So if nothing else, it's got that going for it. And I'm excited. I think that this Dipplin and Thwackey are really cool. Let's talk about the Ogerpons, shall we? What's sick about this set is that we don't just get 1 shiny new gimmick deck. We've got 2 shiny new gimmick decks to play with. unlike that Festival lead deck we just looked at. The Ogerpon Toolbox deck is a EX deck that has all these different mask-themed Ogerpon that you can pivot between with the Ogre's Mask item card. Ogre's Mask allows you to choose a Pokemon EX in your discard pile that has Ogerpon in its name and switch it with one of your Pokemon EX in play that has Ogerpon in its name. Any attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play, and any other effects remain on the new Pokemon. So it basically allows you to Thornton or Ninja Boy your Ogerpon into each other while only being an item, which in a vacuum is pretty insane, considering this kind of Pokemon switching effect has been exclusively reserved for supporter cards in the modern Pokemon TCG. Teal Mask Ogerpon EX seems like the main guy of the Ogerpon. It's got the Teal Dance ability, which allows you to attach a basic grass energy from your hand to Teal Mask Ogerpon EX and then draw a card. So it accelerates grass energy into play and draws cards. That's a very strong ability. If you have 4 Teal Mask Ogerpon EX in play, you could theoretically accelerate a grass energy from your hand to each of them and draw 4 cards. The issue with an ability like this is that you always have to have the grass energy in your hand in order to use the ability. If you don't have a grass energy in your hand, then Teal Dance does not work and you don't get to draw extra cards. The prerequisite is that you always have to have grass energy in your hand. So you're going to want to play this card with cards that get you grass energy, like Earthen Vessel or Energy Retrieval, stuff like that. The other downside to this style of ability is that you have to spread your energy out if you want to draw multiple cards a turn. You can't just use Teal Dance on the same Ogerpon twice. So if you want to accelerate more than one energy to an Ogerpon EX during your turn, you'll have to supplement Teal Dance with supporter cards like Gardenia's Vigor. If you watch the stream, then you know that I am not a big fan of Gardenia's Vigor. This supporter has not been good in the Pokemon TCG so far, released in Astral Radiance years ago, and it has not really been relevant the entire time it's been legal so far. It allows you to draw 2 cards and then attach up to 2 grass energy from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. This is the best grass energy acceleration option that we have outside of Ogerpon EX's ability. So you could pair Ogerpon EX with Gardenia's Vigor if you want to get more grass energy into play, but I think this supporter is super weak. And it requires that you have even more grass energy in your hand, and your grass energy are already going to be getting soaked up by your Ogerpon EX's abilities. So how many grass energy are you realistically going to have in your hand during a turn? Are you going to have 4 grass energy to attach from your hand to your Pokemon? I don't think so, but Gardenia's Vigor is an option. Teal Mask Ogerpon EX's attack, Myriad Leaf Shower, costs 3 grass energy and does 30 damage, plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. Being a grass Pokemon, you have to ask yourself, how easily does this card knock out Charizard EX? Charizard EX is the big bad of this format, winning the European International Championships and the Orlando Regional Championships. It also just won the Aichi Champions League in Japan. Charizard EX is very much the deck to beat. Myriad Leaf Shower will one-hit KO a loaded Charizard EX with 2 energy attached to it, dealing 180 damage times 2. That is 360 damage, enough damage to one-hit KO Charizard. So it does check that box. It's otherwise a very underwhelming attack, as you'll be doing about 180 damage, maybe 210 damage for 3 grass energy. 3 unflexible grass energy. You have to have 3 actual grass energy attached to this thing in order to use Myriad Leaf Shower. And that's important because all these other Ogerpon cards require different kinds of energy attached to them. So I'm definitely underwhelmed that Myriad Leaf Shower and Teal Dance only interact with Grass Energy when you have all these other cool Ogerpon cards that don't interact with Grass Energy. My favorite of the Ogerpon EX cards is definitely Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX. It's also got 210 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Sob, does 20 damage for colorless energy, and during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. Fine. The real reason to play this card is its awesome Torrential Pump attack. For a water and 2 colorless energy, it does 100 damage. You may shuffle 3 energy attached to this Pokemon into your deck, and if you do, this attack also does 120 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. What this card offers is for Baxcalibur decks to have another way to spread damage other than Radiant Greninja. It effectively gives Baxcalibur decks a second Radiant Greninja, which is really good. I mean, Radiant Greninja is probably the best attacker in the Baxcalibur decks. It is such a powerhouse of a card that deck would not be half of what it is without Radiant Greninja threatening 90 damage to 2 targets. Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX gives those Baxcalibur decks another option to target 2 different things, dealing even more damage than Radiant Greninja, 100 to the active and 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. You can take out benched Bibarel with Torrential Pump. I really like that while knocking out low HP targets in the active spot. You could gust up Manaphy and use Canceling Cologne and knock out Manaphy with a Bibarel on the bench, something like that. And you get to conserve the water energy. You throw the water energy back into the deck, which really alleviates the pressure on your energy retrieval items like Superior Energy Retrieval. So this card will go very well in Baxcalibur decks if they decide that they want another spread option. It's possible that Baxcalibur decks don't even need this since they do have Radiant Greninja already, but it's a great option that they have available to them now. I also really like Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX. Like all the other Ogerpon, it's got 210 hit points, and this one has the Cornerstone Stance ability, which prevents all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. This card has arrived at the perfect time. Many of the best attackers in standard format have abilities, and the fact that Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX blocks those attackers in a format without Path to the Peak is really cool. Cards like Alolan Vulpix V-Star have seen play for the very same reason, but the weakness of Alolan Vulpix V-Star is that you have to actually attack with it in order to start walling. And if your opponent is able to maybe Prime Catcher around the Alolan Vulpix V-Star and bring it back into the active spot, they can remove that defensive effect on the Alolan Vulpix V-Star. Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX just has an ability that cannot be removed or negated easily outside of a card like Canceling Cologne. So unless your opponent's playing Canceling Cologne, you don't have to worry about them knocking out your Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX if they have an ability. Its attack, Demolish, costs a fighting and 2 colorless energy and does 140 damage, and this attack's damage is not affected by weakness, resistance, or by any other effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. I think this card is an effective wall card. I love that it doesn't have to attack to activate that defensive aspect of it. Just a good card that you can slap down and will be disruptive to a whole bunch of decks in Standard. I think this card's just a strict upgrade on Alolan Vulpix V-Star. That means it's got some potential. Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX is the heavy hitter of the bunch. It has 2 attacks. Its first attack, Wrathful Hearth, does 20 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon for a fire and 2 colorless energy. If there are 20 damage counters on your Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX, wow, you can do Wrathful Hearth for 400 damage. Your opponent will never see it coming. Most of the time, you won't be able to Wrathful Hearth for a lot of damage, but the attack is there if for whatever reason your opponent cannot one-hit KO this very low HP 2-Prizer. I mean, honestly, if we're talking about 2-Prize Pokemon, 210 hit points is the low end of HP for 2-Prize Pokemon now. So Wrathful Hearth doesn't make a lot of sense for Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX, as it's not a huge Pokemon that will be difficult to one-hit KO, so you're not going to get a lot of mileage out of that attack. Its second attack, Dynamic Blaze, costs 3 Fire Energy and does 140 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, it does 140 more damage, and you have to discard all energy from this Pokemon. This is a very expensive attack. If we think about the best ways to accelerate Fire Energy into play in standard format, there's one answer. It's Charizard EX. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to use Charizard EX's Infernal Rain ability to accelerate 3 energy onto Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX in order to use Dynamic Blaze for 280 damage? I mean, Dynamic Blaze does one-hit KO Pidgeot EX, which is really important because in the Charizard mirror, you're going to see a lot of Pidgeot EX. So that is an option. You could accelerate energy to this, knock out a Pidgeot EX. You do have to discard all the energy. So in a Charizard deck, that is a lot of energy to get rid of. I mean, discarding 3 energy is really tough, especially since lists are playing only like 6 Fire Energy and 2 Rod. So devoting that many resources to attacking with Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX doesn't seem good in a Charizard deck, even if you can one-hit KO Pidgeot EX, even if you could one-hit KO a Charizard EX with a maximum belt attached. It seems like a gross misuse of resources in that deck. You could play Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX in an Arceus Armarouge deck. Arceus can accelerate Fire Energy into play. Then you can move those Fire Energy to Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX with Armarouge and fire off big Dynamic Blaze attacks. Getting rid of 3 Fire Energy isn't great in the Arceus Armarouge deck. Usually you want to keep those energy in play. But if you have extra energy online, maybe after you've used Trinity Nova a couple of times, you've got some extra Fire Energy that you don't mind unloading to take a big one-hit KO, I could see Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX being used in that context too. But honestly, looking at all 4 of these Ogerpon cards next to each other, they just don't seem to have a lot of synergy together. Teal Mask Ogerpon EX takes all grass energy. Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon EX takes all fire energy. And then the other 2 have very specific use cases that don't really go together. So the fact that there's an Ogre's Mask item card is neat, but it doesn't inherently seem very strong to me given the design of each of these cards. They all feel like cards that are destined for different decks rather than being played together. You could use Luminous Energy to attack with your Teal Mask Ogerpon EX and your Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX and your Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX, right? I mean, I guess maybe that was the intended design, and then you can swap into Hearthflame if your Mask guy gets hit but not one-hit KO'd, and you can retaliate with a Wrathful Hearth. That just doesn't seem that good to me. It seems super gimmicky and unreliable. I mean, think for a second about the good decks in standard format. I mean, really think about them. Does this silly mask strategy really keep up? Really? I don't think so. I think that some of the Ogerpon cards are interesting, and certainly a card like Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX could see play with Baxcalibur. I think this is the strongest attacker of the bunch. The Teal Dance ability is an interesting draw ability, but I'm not convinced that this is going to be a meta deck upon release. I don't think I'm tripping. I think this is not really a meta deck. It doesn't read like a meta deck. It seems very silly. Yeah, Cornerstone not hitting for weakness is like a is like an insane debuff for no reason. And then not to mention your board is just filled with these 210 hit point two-prizers. Like, right? Like, this is terrible. The Ogerpon deck is like hilariously just so much worse than Future Box. Kind of comparing apples to apples. Both Future Box and the Ogerpon deck are kind of these toolbox decks that can hit for weakness, but the Future Box deck just seems so much stronger and has so many more good things going for it than these guys. Magcargo EX wins the award for silliest looking EX Pokemon from Twilight Masquerade, but that's about all it's getting rewarded for. This is not a very good card. It's got 270 hit points and 2 attacks. Don't be fooled by the fact that Ground Burn can do a lot of damage, okay? That doesn't mean that it's good. Just because Magcargo EX can do 420 damage does not mean that it's a good card. Ground Burn costs 2 fire and a colorless energy. It does 140 damage, and each player discards the top card of their deck. The attack does 140 more damage for each energy card you discarded in this way. If you discard an energy off the top of your deck, and your opponent discards an energy off the top of their deck, then woo! We do 420 damage. Yeah. Okay. That requires a lot. First of all, you've got to get 3 energy onto your Magcargo EX. How are we going to do that? And don't say Charizard EX, okay? Charizard EX is just better off without Magcargo. You're coping really hard if you want to put this in your Charizard EX deck. So what are our other options? You could play it with TM Turbo Energize. You could play it with Magma Basin. Sure. You could play it with Armor Rouge. Okay. But those are good options for getting 2 energy into play, not 3. If you attach an energy from hand and use Magma Basin, that's 2 energy. Getting 3 energy onto Magcargo EX will be a pain. And then after getting 3 energy on your 270 hit point 2 prize Pokemon, then you got to figure out how to get a basic energy on top of your deck and also pray that your opponent has an energy on top of their deck. Do I need to keep talking about it? This is a bad card. Charizard EX has no friends. It turns out Charizard is the best attacker in the Charizard deck. Charizard's the best attacker in the format. Why is this Torkoal so bad? Why won't they just make a good Torkoal? Huh? What are you afraid of, creatures? Infernape is a fun new Stage 2 Pokemon with a nice ability, Fire Dancing. It allows you to attach a basic Fire Energy, a basic Fighting Energy, or one of each from your hand to your Pokemon in any way you like. I don't think that this will be enough to power up cards like Magcargo EX. If you've got some sort of fire deck fever dream in your mind and Infernape seems like it's the answer, I can pretty much assure you that it's not. And you're better off just playing Charizard EX in standard format, okay? So Infernape, not built for standard format, in a format with Charizard EX, which is just the best energy accelerator, the best attacker, the best deck in the format. In Gym Leader Challenge, however, where Rulebox Pokemon are banished and not allowed to be played, Infernape has more legs. Fire Dancing, getting you 2 energy from your hand into play a turn, can help charge up powerful attacks. There aren't a lot of Fire Gym Leader Challenge attackers that can use both Fighting and Fire Energy, but the Fighting Energy could fulfill any colorless attack costs that fire attackers have. Unfortunately for Infernape, this card doesn't jive super well with the best fire support Pokemon, which is Charizard from the Pokemon Go set, which doubles up all of your fire energy in play. Charizard from Pokemon Go would have no effect with the fighting energy that Infernape accelerates. So I don't think that this Infernape is all that great. Its attack Scorching Fire does 200 damage, and you have to discard an energy from this Pokemon in order to use it. It's just okay. Okay in Gym Leader Challenge, doesn't solve fire by any means, and pretty much unplayable in standard. Chandelure is one of those Pokemon that always gets cards that are like almost good. They're all readers, like you read all of them. They're always interesting, but they're never really great. It's a shame, really, because Chandelure is one of the coolest ghost Pokemon in the Pokemon universe. This Chandelure has a very Chandelure amount of HP, 130 hit points for a Stage 2 Pokemon. This needs to stop. It is 2024. Why do our Stage 2 Pokemon have 130 hit points? It's ridiculous. Its ability, Inviting Lights, says once during your turn, you may use this ability. Each player draws a card. And then its Mind Ruler attack does 30 damage for each card in your opponent's hand. If you have 4 Chandelure in play, then you get to draw 4 cards a turn while also giving your opponent 4 cards, right? So then Mind Ruler could do a decent chunk of damage. If your opponent has 10 cards in their hand, you're doing 300 damage. And it's not too hard to see how you could boost your opponent's maybe 6 or 7 card hand up to a 10 card hand. The fact that its Mind Ruler attack only costs 1 fire energy does mean that it will be easy to attack with, but ultimately I think that a card like Tinkaton is just better than Chandelure, since Tinkaton does more damage for the amount of cards in your hand and is not dependent on your opponent not playing around your strategy in order to do lots of damage. Some decks don't play a lot of hand shuffling cards, right? Like Lost Box decks don't. Chien-Pao Baxcalibur decks don't really play any cards that put their hands back into the deck. Maybe one Iono. So Chandelure could hilariously punish those decks for never resetting their hand, but I think Tinkaton EX is probably just a better strategy than Chandelure at the end of the day. There's a couple interesting new water single prizers. First up is Cramorant. It's got the Spit Shot attack, which requires that you discard all energy from this Pokemon, and the attack does 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This card could be played in Water-type Gym Leader Challenge decks that use the Rain Dance style abilities like Frostmoth's Ice Dance or Baxcalibur's Super Cold ability to rain water energy onto Cramorant, and then in Gym Leader Challenge format, you could pick off your opponent's bench sitters and support Pokemon with Spit Shot. I actually kind of like this card as an option. A lot of Water Gym Leader Challenge decks are playing the Kyogre that could do 180 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, but Kyogre requires 4 energy, and Cramorant only requires 3, so it's pretty good for that. Walking Wake is an ancient single prizer with 130 hit points and the Cleaving Wave attack, which costs 2 water and a colorless energy. It allows you to put up to 9 damage counters on this Pokemon, and the attack does 20 damage for each damage counter you put on the Walking Wake. So you could do 180 damage for 3, but then over the course of 2 turns, it knocks itself out. This just doesn't really seem very good to me. Love Poliwrath. Great classic Pokemon from the original 151 Pokemon. The best Pokemon, if you ask me. Poliwrath has 170 hit points and the Jumping Uppercut attack, which costs 2 colorless energy. It does 120 damage, and you can do 120 more damage. If you do, you shuffle Poliwrath and all cards attached to it back into your deck. This is interesting and worth talking about because it's probably one of the most powerful hit and run style attacks ever printed. A 240 damage hit and run attack could be pretty gnarly if you're able to build up Poliwrath after Poliwrath and maybe use Jumping Uppercut to deal damage. With a double turbo energy, you're doing 220 damage for just 1 energy attachment. And then you get to preserve that double turbo energy again by, tossing it into your deck. You could promote a difficult Pokemon for your opponent to deal with, like Mimikyu. The thing that this deck feels like it's missing is a doll or a substitute or something like that. If the Poliwrath deck had a Lily's Polka Doll where you could hit and run into a card that didn't give up a prize card, that would be the dream. And I think that this kind of strategy would really benefit from that. Without a doll or something that doesn't give up a prize card, I feel like it's just going to be a little bit too much. I mean, you're asking to continuously build up a stage 2 attacker turn after turn, while your opponent has access to cards like Prime Catcher and Boss's Orders. They can chase down your Poliwhirl and Poliwag as you try to evolve them over and over again. I mean, there's something here. I think that it's worth noting. This is the strongest hit and run attack that I've ever seen, but it is a lot to set up and maintain, and it really would benefit from a card that doesn't give up a prize card when it gets knocked out. We got a new Milotic with the Tranquil ability, which reads your opponent's Pokemon in play and the cards attached to them cannot be returned to their hand. So this is like the anti-Professor Turo scenario card, the anti-Penny card, which is situationally useful. Are you going to bother setting up a stage 1 Pokemon that evolves from the 30 hit point Phoebus in order to put this effect on your opponent? Probably not. But the effect is here in case it ever becomes incredibly relevant. I have been begging for a reprint of a card like Shrine of Punishment. Shrine of Punishment dealt 10 damage to GX Pokemon between turns. It was a stadium card and really helped single prize decks to keep up with the massive GX Pokemon that reigned during the Sun and Moon era. And Froslass seems like it really fits that bill well. It's got the Freezing Curtain ability, which says during Pokemon checkup, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon in play with an ability, both yours and your opponent's, except any Froslass. And what's crazy about Freezing Curtain is that it stacks. So if you have 2 Froslass in play, that means 2 damage counters to every Pokemon in play with an ability. If you have 3, that's 3. 4, that's 80 damage every time you pass turn. It's 4 damage counters on the way out, 4 damage counters on the way back. And that is a lot of damage. I mean, just think about the fact that so many decks play low HP Pokemon with abilities. You're going to be just melting cards like Manaphy, Jirachi, Comfey, Bibarel, Bidoof, all of these Pokemon with abilities. Freezing Curtain will just knock them out over the course of a couple of turns. So this ability is inherently very powerful, but since it does damage your own Pokemon in play with abilities, it does limit the kinds of Pokemon that you can play alongside Froslass. For instance, you're not going to be able to play Froslass with the Bibarel engine, as you will knock it out very quickly. You won't be able to play Froslass with your own Manaphy to protect from Radiant Greninja, unless you want to, I don't know, put Bravery Charms on your Manaphy, or maybe a Hero's Cape or something to try and make it really big so that your Froslass doesn't knock it out too quickly. So you will always have a little bit of a weakness to spread style attacks, as you can't play abilities to prevent your opponent from using those attacks. But Freezing Curtain is incredibly powerful, and I think this ability certainly will see play. You could play Froslass with Devolution TM. Just imagine letting Freezing Curtain accumulate damage on a Charizard EX over the course of a couple of turns, and then using Devolution TM to devolve the Charizards and knock them out when the Charmanders are revealed. You could play Froslass with Banette EX to item lock your opponent and then let Freezing Curtain deal residual damage while your opponent is stuck, unable to play their item cards. I think that Froslass has a lot of potential, but finding the right partner for Froslass will be a little bit of a challenge, since you can't play any of your own Pokemon with abilities alongside Froslass effectively. The new Glalie combos with the Froslass really well. It has the damage beat attack for 1 water energy. It does 20 damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So you could rack up damage with Freezing Curtain and then use damage beats to finish off that Pokemon once it has a bunch of damage counters on it. Maybe Froslass decks will play like one Glalie, but I imagine that more often than not, you'll probably want to evolve your Snorunt into Froslass. So Glalie seems like a good option to have, maybe as a one-of. All right, guys, this Palafin EX, this thing's crazy, all right? It's crazy. This is just a crazy card. And it feels like Twilight Masquerade has got a lot of crazy cards in it. This thing's crazy for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, look at that HP total. It clears the 330 damage that Charizard EX can do at the end of a game. 340 HP is a massive HP total. It's also got the Giga Impact attack, which does 250 damage for just one water energy. You're going to be one-hit KOing every basic Pokemon EX and Pokemon V for just one water energy. Are there any basic Pokemon EX with over 250 hit points? I don't think so. Almost every basic Pokemon EX and every basic Pokemon V for just one water energy. This is just a lot to deal with. 340 hit points, a one energy attack that does 250 damage. But there is a catch. Palafin EX has the Hero's Spirit ability, which says that you can only put this Pokemon into play with the effect of Palafin's Zero to Hero ability. So let's see what that is. Palafin has the Zero to Hero ability, which says once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from the active spot to the bench, you may search your deck for a Palafin EX and switch it with this Pokemon. Any attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play, and any other effects remain on the new Pokemon. If you switch to Pokemon in this way, shuffle this card into your deck. That's a lot, but basically, if you move Palafin from the active to the bench, you get to swap the Palafin with a Palafin EX. So you have to switch it to the bench. But then if you want to attack with Palafin EX, it'll be on your bench. So then you have to switch it back to the active spot if you want to attack with Palafin on the same turn that you used the Zero to Hero ability. Now, fortunately, this is a lot of pivoting and moving around. And the question is going to be, is it worth it? Is it possible to consistently get Palafin EX online and into play and attacking? I think that this Palafin card is just way too strong to fail. 340 hit points is crazy. Giga Impact, 250 damage for one energy, that's crazy. You just got to solve the issues with setting this deck up. And I think that it's possible to do that with ample switch cards and maybe the Dunsparce draw engine. I really like the Dunsparce in combination with Palafin EX because you can play a switch and switch into the Dunsparce and then use the Dunsparce's runaway draw ability, move it out of the active spot and draw you 3 cards, and then you can promote whatever Pokemon you want. So you effectively turn one switch into 2 switch effects with the Dunsparce while also drawing cards. And I really think that the Dunsparce has a lot of promise with Palafin, especially because the Dunsparce has free retreat. I mean, this is going to be a very mobile deck. You can play Dunsparce to Dunsparce, 4 copies of Switch. You can play Prime Catcher. You can play the new supporter card. I think Kieran is going to be a major player in this Palafin deck. It's a new supporter card that allows you to choose one of 2 different effects. You can either switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, or you can make it so that during your turn, your Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. So Kieran was very clearly designed with this Palafin EX deck in mind. Not only does it give you the very needed switch outs that you need, it also allows you to boost your 250 damage attack up to 280 damage, which will clear all Pokemon V-Star and the very popular Pidgeot EX. I see Palafin EX getting paired with Prime Catcher as the A-Spec, though there are a bunch of different options you could choose from. I like Prime Catcher the best since it will allow you to do things like Kieran to boost your damage output, and Gust, a Pidgeot EX in the same turn. It also doubles as a switch card, making it so that you can reset your Giga Impact attack or maybe use the Zero to Hero ability effectively. And you could play Maximum Belt. I mean, with Maximum Belt and Kieran, you could one-hit KO a Charizard EX, but I already think that you're going to have a decent Charizard EX matchup, especially if you play heavy Gust counts. You could chase down your opponent's Rotom V. You can chase down your opponent's Pidgeot EX with Kieran and Prime Catcher, and then all you have to do is figure out one Charizard EX and you win the game. And Charizard EX, keep in mind, cannot one-hit KO a Palafin EX without a damage buff. And even with damage buffs, they cannot KO a Palafin EX unless you have one prize card remaining, unless the Charizard EX deck is playing Maximum Belt, and I don't think that they will be playing Maximum Belt, as most Charizard EX decks are playing Prime Catcher right now. I think Palafin EX is very well poised. It's a super low maintenance attack. A huge, huge Pokemon. There's just a little bit of juggling required to get this thing into play, but I think once you get some Palafin up and rolling, this will be a very tough deck to stop. Come on! You gotta believe in the Palafin deck, guys. You got to. The Palafin deck is so sick. Palafin is bad? No, you're tripping. This card is nuts! Why is this Luxray EX the ugliest CGI 3D model Pokemon card that I've ever seen? That is a proper Luxray. 310 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Piercing Glint. Costs 2 colorless energy, does 120 damage. You get to look at your opponent's hand and discard 1 card you find there. That is pretty good. I mean, Luxray V was played for its attack that allowed you to discard a trainer card from your opponent's hand. This just allows you to discard any card from your opponent's hand. And it does 120 damage, so you can knock out Pokemon like Comfey. You can knock out a Cramorant. You can actually knock some things out with Piercing Glint, or set up your opponent's Pokemon that maybe is a little more difficult to knock out for a follow-up Volt Strike for 250 damage. You do have to discard all energy from this Pokemon, but Piercing Glint and Volt Strike together are pretty powerful. Hand Disruption is always good, especially after cards like Roxanne or Iono, and the new Unfair Stamp. So I think that this Luxray has got some potential. Piercing Glint could be used for just a double turbo energy. Volt Strike, though, does require 2 lightning energies, so you'll have to figure out how to get those lightning energy onto Luxray in order to fire off some big Volt Strike attacks. It is a stage 2, though, which, you know, is going to make life a little bit hard for Luxray. And you have to ask yourself, is it worth getting this stage 2 Pokemon into play? Is it better than Charizard EX? Yeah. Tough to be a stage 2 Pokemon out here, isn't it? Got a new Zapdos card coming up, single prizer with 120 hit points, and the Thunderbolt attack, which does 190 damage. You do have to discard all energy from this Pokemon. This isn't really going to see any play in standard format, but in Gym Leader Challenge, it is a card worth considering. Lightning type decks in Gym Leader Challenge format have a tough time dealing 190 damage. Many attackers deal about 120 to 140 damage, but Thunderbolts can easily clear some of the biggest attackers in GLC for 2 lightning and a colorless energy. Lightning Gym Leader Challenge decks do usually play the Dynamotor buddies, Flaffy and Electric, which means that you can recharge the energy that you discarded with Thunderbolt easily and get the attack going turn after turn. You would have to switch the Zapdos to your bench to charge it back up if Zapdos didn't get knocked out, but usually these Lightning Gym Leader Challenge decks do play a bunch of switch outs, so that usually isn't a problem. But the biggest problem is that you won't be able to play Zapdos from Team Up if you're playing this Zapdos. Zapdos from Team Up with its Thunderous Assault attack is a great 1 energy attack and a fast lead that most Lightning decks really lean into. Going without Zapdos from Team Up to accommodate for this Zapdos is a decision you'll have to make when building your Lightning Gym Leader Challenge deck. But it is certainly something to weigh, because 190 damage is a lot. And even being able to paralyze on a coin flip for 1 Lightning is not bad either, making this card a halfway decent lead. This Morpeko is pretty cool. It's got 70 hit points and the Snack Search ability, which allows you to look at the top card of your deck and discard it if you want to. Its attack, pick, and patch costs 1 lightning energy and allows you to attach up to 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like. This card seems okay. You could play it in Lightning Gym Leader Challenge decks to accelerate energy onto bigger attackers like Amazing Raikou. You could even attach a grass energy from your discard pile to your Amazing Raikou to get it going. Generally, I think TM Turbo Energize is better than cards like Morpeko, since TM Turbo Energize is a tool card that you can just attach to whoever you happen to open. Apparently, this Morpeko is seeing a little bit of play in standard formats in Japan alongside Rotom V-Star. Rotom V-Star takes tool cards from the discard pile and puts them into the Lost Zone to deal a lot of damage with its Scrap Pulse attack. That attack also costs 2 lightning energy, so being able to charge lightning energy into play would be quite good. And then Snack Search could be an additional way to get tool cards into the discard pile. So that's kind of a fun little strategy. I don't see it being a meta-worthy strategy going forward, but it is a cute and fun little deck, and there is some synergy there between these cards. In my opinion, the most powerful new lightning card from Twilight Masquerade is by far Iron Thorns EX. It's got 230 hit points. It's a future Pokemon, and it has the absolutely wild Initialize ability, which makes it so that while this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with a rule box in play don't have any abilities except for future Pokemon. That means that Charizard EX cannot use Infernal Rain. Pidgeot EX cannot use Quick Search. Gardevoir EX cannot use whatever Gardevoir EX's ability is. Psychic Embrace. Radiant Greninja cannot use Concealed Cards. Chenpao EX cannot use Shivery Chill. So many different powerful meta Pokemon cannot use the abilities that they rely on so long as Iron Thorns EX is in the active spot. And since Iron Thorns EX is a future Pokemon, you can play it with various future cards like Future Booster Energy Capsule and Techno Radar. Iron Thorns' attack, Bolt Cyclone, costs a lightning and 2 colorless energy. It does 140 damage, and you get to move 1 energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. Since Iron Thorns EX was released in Japan's Crimson Haze set, Japanese players have been playing with Iron Thorns legal for their major tournaments in the last month or so. Most notably at the Aichi Champions League, which took place from April 13th to 14th, Iron Thorns EX was the highest placing new archetype from Crimson Haze, placing 9th out of thousands of players. This is the deck list that finished 9th place right here, and as you can see, it is just a Iron Thorns EX Disruption deck, complete with Crushing Hammer, Airy, TM Devolution, Calamitous Wasteland, Judge, all of the most heinous disruption cards you could possibly imagine in one deck. What a beautiful sight. And this list is only playing for Iron Thorns EX. So that means that the opponent has no opportunity to break that Initialize ability. They can't gust out of the ability lock because the only Pokemon in the deck is Iron Thorns EX. I think Iron Thorns EX is awesome. It's got a lot of potential. And the fact that it's going to be 2-hit KOing a lot of Pokemon while locking down abilities, you've got powerful disruption trainers, Airy, Crushing Hammer. This card has a lot going for it, and I think has a lot of potential in our Twilight Masquerade formats. Farigiraf is a new Psychic-type Stage 1 Pokemon with 140 hit points and the mid-rumble attack. It does 40 damage for each of your Stage 1 Pokemon in play. It's just not a lot of damage. Yeah, if you have 6 Stage 1 Pokemon in play, you can do 240 damage for 1 Double Turbo Energy. If you have Double Turbo Energy, it's 220 damage. But you gotta have 6 Stage 1 Pokemon in play. And honestly, you'll never have 6 Stage 1 Pokemon in play because as soon as your opponent takes a knockout, then you have to put a basic down, and that basic won't have a chance to evolve into a Stage 1 until the following turn. Usually, you're going to be doing maybe 100, 4 times 5. Usually, you're going to be doing about 180 damage if you have 5 Stage 1 Pokemon in play and a Double Turbo Energy attached. So maybe you could play Farigiraf with Xatu, right? And use Xatu's Clairvoyant Sensibility to accelerate Psychic Energy. And then you could do 200 damage, without Double Turbo Energy. You could play the single prize Farigiraf alongside Farigiraf EX, which does take Psychic Energy in order to attack and can't be damaged by attacks from basic Pokemon EX. But honestly, Farigiraf EX isn't good, so I don't think that this single prize Farigiraf really elevates Farigiraf EX to the playable realm. These abilities have never been good, and they're not getting good now. Screamtail EX is a psychic ancient Pokemon with 190 hit points and the sudden shriek attack, which costs 1 colorless energy. You can use this attack only if you go second and only during your first turn. I hate attacks like that. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any supporter cards from their hand. Okay. All right. Sure. So you could stop your opponent from playing supporters, which would stop them usually from setting up unless their hand is loaded, but you have to have the Screamtail in the active spot, and you have to have an energy attached to it. And then what are you doing? Crunch does 120 damage, and you can discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon for a Psychic and 2 colorless energy. When I see attacks like Screamtails, I am immediately reminded of Gengar and Mimikyu Tag Team GX with its Horror House GX attack. This is a powerful attack. It made it so your opponent can't play any cards from their hand during their next turn. And then, if you had an extra Psychic, you could force them to draw up to 7 cards and then punish them with a huge Poltergeist for a lot of damage. Gengar and Mimikyu Tag Team GX was used for its Horror House GX attack to buy a turn while you set up Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, which needed a turn to evolve. So it's possible that you could play Screamtail EX to try and buy an extra turn so that you could set up a more complicated strategy on the following turn. I'm not going to totally discount Screamtail EX, as this could have a strong effect on the game if you pull it off consistently. Munkidori is a basic psychic Pokemon with the Adrenaline Power ability, which allows you to move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's awesome, except you can only use that if you have a Darkness Energy attached to your Munkidori. That's terrible. It's funny how just that little requirement can turn ability from being awesome to terrible, just like that. A card like Radiant Alakazam is just better for manipulating damage. Yeah, you don't get to move damage from your guys to your opponent's guys with Radiant Alakazam, but at least you don't have to attach a Darkness Energy to it in order to use the ability. Your energy attachment for turn is such a valuable resource. Wasting your energy attachment for turn by attaching a Darkness Energy to Munkidori just seems like not worth it. Fezandipiti is a basic psychic Pokemon with 120 hit points and the Adrenaline Pheromones ability, which makes it so that if this Pokemon has any Darkness Energy attached to it, and if any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. Now, this is actually kind of an interesting ability, unlike the Munkidori's, which is completely terrible. Making your Pokemon invincible on a coin flip is good half the time. And then its attack, Energy Feathers, does 30 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. So you would have to have a whole bunch of energy attached to your Fezandipiti, and one of them would have to be a Darkness Energy so that you can unlock its Adrenaline Pheromones ability. You could play Fezandipiti in a Gardevoir EX deck, right? Gardevoir EX has already proven that it is a top contender in standard formats. You could play Luminous Energy or even basic Darkness Energy to attach to Fezandipiti and then deal a lot of damage with Energy Feathers and make your Fezandipiti have a 50% chance of not getting KO'd. I think it might be worth playing one of these in your Gardevoir EX deck because denying prizes is just so huge. Fezandipiti also jives with the fact that Gardevoir EX decks are already playing the tool cards, Bravery Charm, Hero's Cape, stuff like that, to make their basic Pokemon bigger so that they can take more energy from Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace. You could load a lot of energy onto your Fezandipiti if it had a Hero's Cape attached to it, right? If you have 10 energy on Fezandipiti, you could do 300 damage with Energy Feathers. I don't think that'll ever happen since Gardevoir decks aren't even playing that many Psychic Energy these days, but the option is there. There's a neat new Hisuian Arcanine that has the free attack Proud Fangs, which does 30 damage plus 90 more damage if your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on them. This set seems like it's going to be a great boost for fighting Gym Leader Challenge decks. There are quite a few good fighting type Pokemon that deal damage to your own bench. And the fact that Hisuian Arcanine can easily slot into those decks while not actually taking an energy to attack is just phenomenal. Proud Fangs does 120 damage, which can knock out lower HP threats in Gym Leader Challenge formats. And then if you attach a Muscle Band to Hisuian Arcanine, you could do 140 damage. It's not the most amount of damage, but the fact that you can use this attack for free and the fact that there are already good fighting attackers that damage your bench, and you could just slot this Hisuian Arcanine right into the deck, I really like that. And I think that this is going to go great with Earthquake attackers like Donphan from Vivid Voltage. We also got Hawlucha with the prize count attack, costs 2 fighting energy, and does 50 damage plus 90 more damage if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. And God knows you'll always be doing 140 damage with Hawlucha in Gym Leader Challenge format because you'll always be losing with your fighting deck. This is by far my favorite new fighting Pokemon from Twilight Masquerade. Sorry, Greninja EX, I know. And we'll get to Greninja EX, but Ting Lu! Ting Lu is that guy. This card is very strong. It's a basic Pokemon with 140 hit points and the Ground Crack attack, which costs 1 fighting energy and does 30 damage. If there's a Stadium in play, the attack also does 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, then you discard the Stadium. Ting Lu is perfect for fighting type Gym Leader Challenge decks. Spread is a very good strategy, and spreading 30 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon for just 1 energy on a basic is phenomenal. There is no other card in Gym Leader Challenge format that spreads this much damage for this little amount of energy on a basic Pokemon. There is another fighting type Pokemon that has a very similar attack. Palossand from Silver Tempest is a stage 1 Pokemon with the Sandpot Trap attack, which costs 1 fighting energy and does 30 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. The problem with Palossand is that it didn't really have a partner to help spread damage with. So after your opponent knocked out Palossand, you couldn't keep the spread pressure going without recovering Palossand from the discard pile, getting it back into play, and using Sandpot Trap again. But now, with Ting Lu, you have 2 different ways to be able to spread 30 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. Ting Lu and Palossand together are going to form the backbone of a very potent spread strategy for fighting type Gym Leader Challenge decks. Ting Lu can single-handedly decimate entire Darkness, Lightning, and colorless setups. I mean, you're knocking out Dynamos, you're knocking out Mareeps, you're knocking out Coughings, you're knocking out Minchinos, all sorts of stuff for just 1 energy while spreading damage onto their benches. And you can play Focus Sash with Ting Lu and Palafin, make them really difficult to knock out. It's really encouraging to see some strong 1 energy fighting Pokemon attackers like Ting Lu getting printed. As it feels like fighting is kind of already leaning into that strategy, and Ting Lu plays perfectly along with the spread fighting strategy with Palafin. I personally am very excited to get cooking with my new Ting Lu fighting deck. Another awesome new fighting Pokemon for fighting type Gym Leader Challenge decks. We've got Okidogi. It's got 130 hit points, and its Oki Punchy attack does 70 damage for 2 fighting energy, and that is not very good. But it's got the Adrenaline Power ability, which makes it so that as long as there's a Darkness energy attached to Okidogi, it gets plus 100 hit points, and its attacks do 100 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Meaning that Okidogi, with a Darkness energy attached, has 230 HP, and the Oki Punchy attack, which will be doing 170 damage for 2 energy. You can actually use Aurora Energy or Luminous Energy or a Blend Energy and 1 Fighting Energy, and that Rainbow Energy will accommodate for the Darkness Energy requirement and the Fighting Energy requirement. It'll simultaneously power up Okidogi's Adrenaline Power ability and qualify as the Fighting Energy to satisfy Oki Punchy's 2 Fighting Energy requirements, which is awesome for fighting Gym Leader Challenge decks. I mean, this is just a huge, basic, heavy hitter that can take huge one-hit knockouts, deny KOs in return. It is certainly worth putting 2 energy on this thing to be able to deal that much damage and soak hits without getting 1-hit KO'd necessarily in return. I am very excited about Okidogi and Gym Leader Challenge. I think it is going to be a card that is certainly worth playing. I don't think that this card is necessarily as good in standard formats. I mean, Lost Box decks just kind of have better fighting answers right now, and that really seems like the best way to accelerate energy onto Okidogi in standard would be with like Mirage Gate. You could put 2 fighting and a Darkness onto it and deal 170 damage to 1-hit KO. Just about anything that is weak to fighting. So sure, that is an option. I mean, having a basic Pokemon with 230 hit points and only giving up 1 prize in a Lost Box deck would be pretty crazy. So maybe this thing does see some play in Lost Box decks. It is certainly an option, but I think it will make more of a splash in Gym Leader Challenge format. This Conkeldurr is kind of fun. It's got the Gutsy Swing attack, which does 250 damage for a fighting and 3 colorless energy. But if this Pokemon is affected by a special condition, you get to ignore all energy in this attack's attack cost. So a free attack, but your Conkeldurr has to be affected by a special condition. Thankfully, there's a very easy way to make sure that your Conkeldurr is affected by a special condition. Brutus has the Toxic Powder ability, which allows you to make both active Pokemon poisoned if Brutus has a booster of the Ancient variety attached to it. So all you need is a Brute Bonnet, Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, and then you can poison the defending Pokemon and your Conkeldurr, which will allow you to do 250 damage for free. But wait, there's more. If you have a Radiant Hisuian Sneasler in play, then you get to place 2 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon between turns. You're dealing an effective 280 damage for free. And then if you really want to get nasty with it, you can play Perilous Jungle and put 2 more damage counters on your opponent's poison non-darkness Pokemon between turns. So that's like 300 damage. How will your opponent possibly win? All right, fine. We can finally talk about Greninja. People in Japan are playing Greninja EX. It's won a few city leagues even. I mean, we see Greninja EX paired with Pidgeot EX. That seems to be the most successful variants that we're seeing out of these city leagues, but there's a whole bunch of different ways to play Greninja EX. This one has Arceus as a partner with Pidgeot. This one apparently has Origin Form Palkia V-Star and Baxcalibur and Chenpao and a 101 Greninja EX. Here's a Lost Box Greninja EX deck. Here's a Charizard Greninja EX deck. But it does seem like the most successful Greninja EX decks are the ones that are keeping things simple and just playing Pidgeot EX as a consistency booster. Greninja EX is a new fighting type stage 2 Pokemon with 310 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Ninja Blade, costs 1 water energy and does 170 damage. It allows you to search your deck for any card and put it into your hand. And then Duplicate Barrage costs a fighting and 2 colorless energy and requires that you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, and the attack does 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So you basically have Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, the Stage 2 edition. And this one has got everybody's favorite starter Pokemon, Greninja, on it. Ninja Blade costing 1 water energy, dealing 170 damage is super good. I mean, it 2-hit KOs just about everything in the Pokemon TCG and allows you to consistently grab what you want from your deck. Combined with Quick Search and Pidgeot EX, you could be searching your deck for whatever 2 cards you want every turn, which will allow you to kind of pick apart your opponent's strategy and set up cool win conditions with Duplicate Barrage. Duplicate Barrage is obviously stopped by Manaphy, but with Ninja Blade and a Pidgeot EX, you could easily search your deck for a Canceling Cologne and then bring up your opponent's Manaphy, Canceling Cologne, and then Duplicate Barrage to knock out the Manaphy and something else, or even just 2 other Pokemon on your opponent's bench. So this seems like a very versatile card, but Greninja EX did not have a top finish at the Aichi Champions League. So at the biggest tournament hosted in this Crimson Haze format in Japan, which Greninja EX was legal for, it did not have any placements. So even though this card has had some decent results at city leagues, is it just because Japanese players like Greninja EX, or maybe they just like toying with the new strategy? Or is it going to be a sleeper top deck in our Twilight Masquerade format? I'm not as sold on Greninja EX being a powerhouse. I think it's a card that could maybe see some select success in formats where it makes sense. Maybe if hitting for fighting weakness ever becomes like the thing to do in standard. If the BDIFs are fighting weak, Greninja EX will certainly be one of the strongest fighting type options, but that's just not really the case right now. It's all about hitting for grass weakness and dealing with Charizard EX, and Greninja EX doesn't inherently do those things. I think this card has got some decent options. I think it's a well-designed card. I just don't think that it's going to be like a tier 1 deck on release. I think it'll just be okay. Yeah, I think that card's mid, honestly. But mid decks win tournaments all the time, guys. I'll go on record as saying that I think that Palafin EX is way better than Greninja EX. Palafin EX will top 8 a regional before Greninja does. Bet. Well, now I'm curious to see what chat thinks. Which deck has a better chance to top 8 NAIC? Is it Greninja EX or Palafin EX? We really got some Greninja EX believers out there. I said better chance. Not that either of them will, but which card has the better chance? Even if neither of them do, one of them has to have a better chance of doing it than the other. And we got a tight race here. 44% of the votes for Greninja EX, 53. Oh my gosh, Palafin's lead is shrinking. I can't wait to audit all of you Greninja EX believers. Greninja EX wins 51% of respondents think that it has a better chance of top-8ing NAIC than Palafin EX. We'll just have to wait and see. This Aggron is pretty neat. 180 hit points in the Angry Slam attack, which does 50 damage for each of your Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. So, if all of your Pokemon have damage counters on it, and you have 6 Pokemon in play, you can do 300 damage for, just 1 Metal Energy. You could play Aggron with Dodrio or the Gengar that, pops itself out of the discard pile. Kind of like you would play a Hisuian Zoroark V-Star deck, but then you have to set up this Aggron, right? And Angry Slam. You could also pair Aggron with the Steelix that has an Earthquake attack, which deals 30 damage to all of your bench Pokemon. And then you could Angry Slam. So maybe Aggron Steelix is the angle. Unfortunately, as cool of a card as this guy is, I think that attacking with single prize stage 2 Pokemon, if you're going to be attacking with a single prize stage 2 Pokemon, that card better be broken. I mean, just full on broken in order for it to be playable in standard format. I mean, just look around standard format. The format is dominated by Charizard Pidgeot. I mean, if you're evolving a stage 2 Pokemon into play, it's got to do something game-breaking, like accelerate 3 fire energy into play and be able to do 300 damage and have 330 hit points. Or search out whatever card you want out of your deck every single turn. Or accelerate as many water energy as you want from your hand into play so that you can one-hit KO things with Chien-Pao EX. Yeah, no. Holy smokes, what is this? We've got new dragon Pokemon. This is crazy. It feels like we've been starved of all dragon Pokemon for the first half of the Scarlet and Violet block. And even here, we're getting just a few, but they're all really good. We just got news that there's going to be a special dragon-themed mini set releasing sometime this year, which means that there are more good dragon Pokemon on the horizon. Dragapult EX is the big new dragon Pokemon from Twilight Masquerade. It's got 320 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Jet Headbutt, does 70 damage for colorless energy. And then its second attack, Phantom Dive, does 200 damage for a fire and a psychic, and allows you to place 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. This is a really gnarly attack and does exactly what Dragapult VMAX did, but better, while giving up less prizes and having no weakness, which is huge. A 320 hit point stage 2 Pokemon with no weakness that can take multiple knockouts at the same time by spreading damage to the bench and dealing 200 damage to the active spots. This is a phenomenal card. If only there was a really good stage 1 Pokemon that Dragapult EX could evolve from. Dracloak has the Telling Spirit ability, which allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one of them into your hand and the other one on the bottom of your deck. This is Airmail, Dragon style, and I love to see it. This Dracloak is going to be the backbone of the draw engine in any Dragapult EX deck, helping you to churn through your deck while not wasting resources in the process. You get to look at 2 cards, keep one, and put the other one on the bottom of the deck. So if you see a valuable card that you want to put away for later, you get to just put it on the bottom of your deck, keep the most relevant card for the situation at hand. This ability is so strong that it's also going to change the way Dragon Gym Leader Challenge decks function. Previously, the only consistency support options that Dragon had in Gym Leader Challenge format were Gabite with its Dragon Call ability, Dragonite with its Fast Call ability, and then there's the Regidrago, which can fill its hand to 4 cards. Dracloak adds a much-needed consistency boost to Dragon Gym Leader Challenge decks. Even just seeing an additional 2 cards a turn can make a huge huge difference. And the fact that this card has 90 hit points, it's level ball searchable, it can be set up with Gabite's Dragon Call ability. I love what this card means for Dragon Gym Leader Challenge decks. And what a beautiful day for Dragon fans it is in the Pokemon TCG. We've also got Tatsugiri on the way, a 70 hit point basic Pokemon with the Attract Customers ability, which reads, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal a supporter card you find there, and put it into your hand. That is so good. It is so good. It's like a little Pokegear that you get to play every single turn. And you can just put a tool card on your Tatsugiri that allows it to retreat for free, since it only has a 1 energy retreat cost. You can easily retreat into Tatsugiri and use its Attract Customers ability to help dig supporters out of the top of your deck. In the same way that Mew from Celebrations was used to help boost the consistency of decks by allowing you to look at the top 6 cards and choose an item card you find there, Tatsugiri will help decks with their consistency by allowing you to fish supporters out of the top of your deck, which is something that if you ever played the Mew from Celebrations, then you know that there were times where you desperately wanted to grab a supporter card but couldn't, since Mew could only get item cards. Tatsugiri gets those supporters, which is arguably way better than Mew from Celebrations. And we saw how good of a card Mew from Celebrations was in so many decks. I think Tatsugiri is going to be a great consistency option in standard format, and Tatsugiri is going to completely change the way that Dragon Gym Leader Challenge decks can be built. Tatsugiri with Jercloak is an entire consistency engine all by itself. With access to the expanded card pool, you can put U-turn board on Tatsugiri to make sure that it always has free retreat throughout the game. Even if your opponent uses Field Blower to remove the U-turn board from Tatsugiri, the U-turn board will go back to your hand, and you could just put it right back down later. In Standard, we have Rescue Board, which is also a great option for the Tatsugiri to allow it to retreat in and out of the active spot, or Beach Court, if you'd rather play that. This card is going to be good, and the fact that it only has 70 hit points means that it can be fished out of the deck. Fished. Get it? With a Buddy Palafin, which is quickly becoming one of the strongest cards in the Pokemon TCG right now. And as if that wasn't enough good news for Dragon Gym Leader Challenge decks, we also have the very first Dragon-type Applin on the way. This Applin changes everything for Dragon Gym Leader Challenge decks. Previously, there were only Grass-type Applin, which means that the Dragon-type Flapple from Evolving Skies was not easy to get into play in Dragon-type decks, because in Gym Leader Challenge format, you can only play a single type of Pokemon in your decks. But now we have a Dragon Applin, which is huge, because that means that now we can play the Dragon Flapple in Dragon-type GLC decks. And the Dragon Flapple is a ridiculously powerful attacker in GLC. It's got the Acidic Mucus attack, which does 50 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability for just 1 colorless energy. Dragon has always wanted a single energy attacker, and the fact that Dragon decks have to play all these different kinds of energy in order to stream attacks, since Dragon-type Pokemon can't decide what type of energy they want to use. The colorless energy requirement on Acidic Mucus is super welcomed. Acidic Mucus will regularly deal 200 damage for just 1 energy in Gym Leader Challenge, since Gym Leader Challenge decks are just chock full of Pokemon that have abilities, because it turns out abilities are pretty good in the Pokemon TCG. And this Applin isn't just a nobody, nothing guy either. It's got a Find a Friend attack, which costs 1 colorless energy and allows you to search your deck for a Pokemon and put it into your hand. So that means that it's also a pretty solid starter. I'm very excited about this Applin, and what it means for my Dragon-type Gym Leader Challenge deck. This Applin evolves into the Dragon-type Dipplin, which has 80 hit points, and the Syrup Catcher attack, which costs a Grass and a Fire Energy, allows you to switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot, and the attack deals 70 damage to the new active Pokemon. This is decent, not as good as the Flapple by any means, but an interesting attack. Now, apparently, there is the Hydrapple Pokemon, which is, I don't know, going to be getting its own Pokemon card soon. So I'm very anxious to see what Hydrapple brings to the Pokemon TCG. Perhaps we'll be getting our first Hydrapple Pokemon in our upcoming Dragon mini set this year. Blood Moon Ursaluna EX is one of the most hyped new cards from Twilight Masquerade. So far in Japan's meta, Blood Moon Ursaluna EX has seen play in Lost Box decks and Lugia V-Star decks. But this card is so versatile, it can get played in any deck. Blood Moon Ursaluna EX has a ridiculous 260 hit points on a basic Pokemon. I mean, just think about that. 260 hit points on a basic Pokemon. And it has the Elder's Technique ability, which reads, this Pokemon's Blood Moon attack costs 1 colorless less for each prize card your opponent has taken. Blood Moon does 240 damage for the steep cost of 5 energy. But this attack gets better as the game goes on and as your opponent takes prize cards. If your opponent has taken 5 prizes, that means you get to use Blood Moon for free. That's a free 240 damage. If your opponent has taken 4 prize cards, it's a 1 energy, 240 damage. And if they've taken only 3 prize cards, which means that they still might have to knock out 2 Blood Moon Ursaluna to win the game, then you can use the attack for 2 energy, which is very easy to do in a Lost Zone deck. Effectively, what Blood Moon Ursaluna EX has allowed in Lost Box decks is for Lost Box decks to have the best of both worlds and play Radiant Greninja and Blood Moon Ursaluna. Since Blood Moon Ursaluna EX kind of gets to act as that big late game sweeper that Radiant Charizard was kind of doing in some Lost Box builds, but not playing Radiant Greninja always felt so bad in Lost Box decks, since getting those extra 2 cards every turn with concealed cards is just such a big boost for consistency. So now Lost Box decks have more or less just cut Radiant Charizard altogether and now play Radiant Greninja, Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, and some combination of other strong attackers like Roaring Moon EX for big one-hit KOs or Iron Hands EX to take multiple prizes. And the fact that Blood Moon Ursaluna EX is a colorless Pokemon means that you're never going to be struggling to get the right energy onto Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. You could put whatever energy you have access to onto Blood Moon Ursaluna and start swinging for 240 damage. It does have the downside that Blood Moon Ursaluna EX can't attack during your next turn, but Lost Box decks already play a bunch of switch cards, so it really is no problem to switch the Blood Moon back to your bench and then back into the active spot to swing for 240 damage again. This card is sure to be played in a ton of decks in our upcoming Twilight Masquerade formats. This card is going to be probably the most impactful new card from Twilight Masquerade. It is just that good. Blissey, Blissey, Blissey. The massive, gigantic egg Pokemon does not disappoint. It's got 300 HP. The largest amount of HP for a Stage 1 Pokemon EX, not named Palafin EX, but you know, Palafin EX, you have to like jump through all those hoops to get into play. You can just evolve your Chansey into Blissey EX, and it is quite a big Pokemon to be dealing with on turn 2. It's got the Happy Switch ability, which allows you to move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. this plays into its large HP really well, since you'll be able to happy switch energy off of Blissey and then use Sharon's Care to pick up a damaged Blissey and put a Chansey right back down and kind of do this cycling, healing thing, which I imagine this deck does. It's even got built-in draw. Its return attack does 180 damage for 3 colorless energy and allows you to fill your hand to 6, which is really good. 180 damage does 2-hit KO everything in the Pokemon TCG, and most Pokemon in the Pokemon TCG will be attempting to 2-hit KO Blissey EX because it has a massive 300 HP. And the goal of this deck that I'm envisioning will be to try and deny your opponent prizes by healing the Blissey with Sharon's Care or Turo's Scenario, and then you just kind of keep laying them down, moving the energy around, and then eventually win because you have, just returned so many times that eventually all your opponent's Pokemon get knocked out. The trainers are always exciting to talk about, but they're even more exciting to review when we got new Ace-Spec cards on the horizon. Probably the most hyped new Ace-Spec out of Twilight Masquerade is the Unfair Stamp item card. This card won the Aichi Champions League and was the second most played Ace-Spec card at that event, trailing only behind Prime Catcher. You can only play Unfair Stamp if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. And it makes it so that each player shuffles their hand into their deck, you draw 5 cards, and your opponent draws 2 cards. It's effectively a Roxanne that you can play as soon as your opponent takes a knockout. So, on turn 2, you could play Unfair Stamp and limit your opponent to a 2-card hand. You gain such a huge card advantage by limiting your opponent to a 2-card hand that early, potentially before they get to set up their strategy or even thin their deck, right? That's like a major thing. You think about hand disruption is really only as good as, your opponent's deck is filled with bad cards. And the unfair thing about Unfair Stamp is that you can play it while your opponent's deck is still super thick, right? Like they could still have 40 cards in their deck and you Unfair Stamp them to 2. There is a super high likelihood that they don't find the 2 cards that they need off of Unfair Stamp. Roxanne is still a very powerful supporter. Iono is a very powerful supporter, but both of those supporters can only limit your opponent's hand at the end of the game once their decks are much smaller. But Unfair Stamp limiting your opponent's hand at the beginning of the game, potentially after the first knockout is taken, this is a crazy advantage to have early on in a match. And the fact that Unfair Stamp doesn't just limit your opponent to 2 cards, it's also a draw card. It allows you to shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 5 cards. And then you could still go on to play a supporter for turn. You could use Unfair Stamp and then Arven for the card you need to complete a combo. You could use Unfair Stamp and then Research to see 7 more cards. This is a super powerful card. And my initial reaction to this card was that maybe it would be okay, but not worth building a strategy around. But now that I kind of see where this card fits in, just to already established Charizard EX Pidgeot decks, and the fact that those decks can search this card out as soon as they want to and limit the opponent's strategy while attacking with massive 330 hit point Charizards. Yeah, Unfair Stamp is just a crazy ace-spec and a card that is sure to see play in our Twilight Masquerade format. Another neat ace-spec is the Hyper Aroma item card, which allows you to search your deck for up to 3 Stage 1 Pokemon and put them into your hand. This is cool as it allows you to explosively set up Stage 1 Pokemon. You can Arven for Hyper Aroma and go get 3 Kirlia. But if we take a look at the Aichi Champions League, a Gardevoir deck, seemingly a deck that would love to play Hyper Aroma, finished in the top 4, and they played, of course, the Unfair Stamp. So I'm not even sure that Hyper Aroma fits into the decks that it would be good in because there are just stronger options available. being able to limit your opponent's hand is just stronger than searching out stage 1 Pokemon, which is something that technically Ultra Ball can do. You could play a card like Hyper Aroma in Golden Go EX, which it instantly turns into a draw card because you could use Hyper Aroma to go search out 3 Golden Go EX and then coin bonus a bunch of times. I just think that Hyper Aroma is a little weak compared to other really powerful Ace-Spec cards that we have in Standard now. This is a funny looking Ace-Spec, isn't it? Survival Cast, a tool card I can't imagine actually putting on my Pokemon. Imagine a Wailord wearing the Survival Cast, okay? Or a Pokemon without arms. Why are there armholes? What do you do with a Weedle that has a Survival Cast on? Survival Cast makes it so that if the Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP and would be knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, that Pokemon is not knocked out and its remaining HP becomes 10. Then you discard Survival Cast. So in some situations, Survival Cast is just strictly better than Hero's Cape. Hero's Cape gives the Pokemon that it's attached to 100 more hit points, but if you're up against a deck that can one-hit KO anything, then Hero's Cape doesn't do squat. So in a lot of situations, Survival Cast is just going to be better, as it guarantees that the Pokemon it's attached to will survive 2 hits. Hero's Cape is a stronger card in some situations because it doesn't get discarded and can easily be reused. Survival Cast does get discarded if the opponent ever hits your Pokemon for enough damage that it would take a knockout. Survival Cast will be played in a similar style of decks that Hero's Cape is, and I expected to see some play. Man, I'm losing my voice straight up, bro. These set reviews are long, man. What is in the secret box? Secret box is a new Ace-Spec that you can only use if you discard 3 other cards from your hand. So that is a net loss of 4 cards. You have to play the secret box, and then you discard 3 other cards from your hand. But there is a huge upside. You get to search your deck for 1 item, 1 tool, 1 supporter, and 1 stadium, and put them into your hand. So you pretty much ditch your hand, and then you get a new hand with a bunch of broken cards in it. This card seems really good in combo-based decks that want to have some sort of explosive turn 2 setup. Baxcalibur comes to mind. Imagine grabbing a rare candy, a tool card, an Irida, and a Pokestop, all with your secret box. That seems very good. It also seems good in Lugia. You can go get an Ultra Ball, a tool card, a supporter, whatever one makes sense for the hand you've got, and a stadium. I think that the secret box could be good in a lot of decks, but certainly decks that want to pull off some sort of crazy combo. And the fact that you can search secret box with Arven just makes it all that much better. You do have to discard 3 other cards from your hand in order to use this card. That's kind of tough. If you have a low hand size, you're not going to be able to play the secret box. And I think that that's one of the things that will ultimately hold this card back. We got another returning Ace-Spec card, the Scoop Up Cyclone. You get to put one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. With Pokemon that have 300 plus HP in standard formats, being able to pick them up and put them back down is very good. We've seen Charizard EX decks with 2 copies of Turo Scenario for just that reason. But I think that Turo Scenario and Sharon's Care existing kind of makes Scoop Up Cyclone a slightly worse card. I think it's really good when an Ace-Spec card can bring something entirely new and fresh to your game plan that no other card can do. I'm not sure that a Charizard deck would want to play Scoop Up Cyclone over Turo Scenario. You could just play Turo's Scenario and use your Ace-Spec card to do something totally unfair, like limit your opponent to 2 cards in their hand. So I don't think that Scoop Up Cyclone is going to be the best Ace-Spec. I don't doubt that it'll find a home somewhere. Being able to reuse abilities that are activated when a Pokemon comes into play is really good, and completely healing a Pokemon is also really good. Scoop Up Cyclone just kind of seems okay to me when compared to the rest of the Ace-Specs in Standard. And then finally, we have got Legacy Energy. kind of like Life Dew, but the energy version. It is an energy that provides a colorless energy when it's attached to a Pokemon. And once per game, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, your opponent takes one fewer prize card. I hate that this card was nerfed. They intentionally made it so that the Legacy Energy would not be broken. I think maybe they were a little bit too afraid of how powerful Life Dew became. Eventually, in expanded format, you could recycle the Life Dew with Sableye's Junk Hunt attack and use it over and over again. They made it so that Legacy Energy will never have that problem by including the once a game text on it. I think Legacy Energy is okay. I mean, it denies a prize. That's good. And could certainly change the pace of a game if it sticks and is used at the right time. Turning a 2-prize Pokemon into a 1-prize Pokemon, or a 1-prize Pokemon to a 0-prize Pokemon. That's pretty good. But your opponent can remove the Legacy Energy with the newly reprinted Enhanced Hammer card or a Temple of Sinnoh Stadium. So Legacy Energy seems okay. I think that the tool cards that make your guys bigger kind of feel better to me than trying to deny your opponent a prize card. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe just denying a prize card could really change the pace of the game. But ultimately, I think the strongest way to change the pace of the game is to limit your opponent to a 2-card hand with Unfair Stamp. I think that Unfair Stamp and Prime Catcher are going to emerge as the most powerful 2 ace specs in the Pokemon TCG. One being a draw card that disrupts your opponent's hand, and one being a card that allows you to switch and target down your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. Both of them doing kind of different things, but being just so strong that most decks will choose to play them. Enhanced Hammer is back, and I am so thankful that it is. Oh man, it seems like for a while there that Pokemon didn't have the guts to reprint Enhanced Hammer. You remember Fan of Waves? How soft are these item cards becoming? Back in my day, we used to remove Special Energy and send them to the discard pile. Enhanced Hammer is a great item card for keeping Special Energy in check. Enhanced Hammer has been a card that's seen a lot of play throughout the history of the Pokemon TCG. It's not always played. If you got Special Energy problems, play the Enhanced Hammer. Love Ball had the potential to be a pretty cool card. Just think, one of the only Pokeballs that hasn't received a trading card yet. And then we got this stinker, Love Ball. Search your deck for a Pokemon with the same name as one of your opponent's Pokemon in play, reveal it, and put it into your hand. This is like explicitly worse than Friend Ball, and Friend Ball wasn't even that good. So Love Ball will surely be terrible. More toys for control decks. Waking Whistle is an item card that allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and put any number of basic Pokemon you find there onto your opponent's bench. Your opponent shuffles the remaining cards back into their deck. So that means that your opponent's basic Pokemon are not safe in your opponent's hand with Erica's Invitation. They're not safe in your opponent's deck with Waking Whistle, and they're not safe in your opponent's discard pile thanks to Mantine. Those basics will make their way into play. So if you want to beat Control, you are going to have to play an adequate number of switch cards, which Control decks can just airy away. Wow, Control is getting another buff. How fun. Bug Catching Set is an item card that allows you to look at the top 7 cards of your deck and choose up to 2 in any combination of grass Pokemon and basic grass energy cards you find there and put them into your hand. This is a good card. It's a very good card, and a card that I think that the Festival Grounds grass deck will play. You're going to want to set up the Grookey and the Thwackey, and you're going to want to set up the whole Dipplin thing. Yeah. The Bug Catching Set is going to be great for that. You can play it in combination with Buddy Buddy Poffin and Nest Balls and just get a very explosive setup. And the fact that the Bug Catching Set allows you to get energy as well as Pokemon means that it's just a super versatile card that I think that grass decks are really going to love. It's also great for fishing those grass energy out of your deck to accelerate with the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. If you end up building a Teal Mask Ogerpon EX deck, getting the grass energy out of the deck, accelerating them into play, and drawing cards, is just going to be a very good thing to do. This card should also find a home in Grass-type Gym Leader Challenge decks, as it's just another search card to add to the pile. And the more item-based search cards in Gym Leader Challenge that you have access to, the better and more consistent that your deck is going to be. Stoked about Bug Catching Set? No, it's not a guarantee like Nest Ball or Ultra Ball, but it is a nice consistency booster. Handy Fan is a new tool card that reads, whenever the active Pokemon this card is attached to takes damage from an opponent's attack, move an energy from the attacking Pokemon to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. I don't think that this kind of effect is very good. I mean, your opponent could always just remove it, and then it's like useless. And its disruption effect is not even that strong. I mean, honestly. People are saying you could play this with Gengar, but Gengar's terrible. People are saying you can play the fan with Gengar EX to move even more energy off your opponent's active Pokemon and onto one of their bench Pokemon. Who cares? It's just not a consistent game-winning strategy, all right? The best way to remove energy from your opponent's Pokemon is to knock them out. That's just the best way to do it. Just knock them out instead. That'll get their energy removed and to the discard pile. Carmine is a new supporter card that you can play if you're going first. And this is the strongest turn one going first supporter that we've ever seen printed. I think previously we had Beauty, but Carmine allows you to discard your hand and draw 5 cards, which you could actually imagine playing at other points in the game, not just on the first turn of the game going first. So Carmine seems very good and can allow for decks that want to get a head start on discarding cards like maybe Ancient Box or Lugia V-Star, can give them that one extra turn to start churning through the deck. Carmine discarding cards and drawing cards, it's like a nerfed research, but you can play it turn 1, so it's pretty good. Hassle is one of the worst supporter cards that I've had the misfortune of reading. You can only play it if one of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Then you get to look at the top 8 cards of your deck and put 3 of them into your hand. Boo. Boo. This is, no, it's all wrong, okay? Cards like Raihan, Teammates, Mela, these are good cards that you can only play if one of your Pokemon was knocked out. Hassle, you don't even get to search your whole deck. Just the top 8? I don't want anything to do with this card. Disgusting. Perrin is a new Pokemon search supporter that allows you to reveal 2 Pokemon from your hand and shuffle them into your deck. Then search your deck for up to that many Pokemon and put them into your hand. It's like a double Pokemon communication. And you know what? I don't think that Pokemon communication is a very good card, so I think Perrin is an even worse supporter card. You have to have Pokemon in your hand in order to play it. It's just worse than cards like Arezu or Clavel or just any other supporter I'd rather play. This is terrible. Lana's Assistance is a supporter that allows you to put up to 3 in any combination of Pokemon that don't have a rule box and basic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. It's kind of like a nerfed Clara. We had Clara for such a long time, and it was a powerful supporter card. In fact, it made it onto my top 10 rotated cards list on YouTube that I released. Lana's Assistance is not quite as powerful as Clara, but a solid recovery option for decks that want to recover cards that don't have a rule box. Community Center is a new stadium card that looks incredibly boring. I have to say, as far as stadium cards go, this one gets me the least excited. But wait, maybe the text is exciting. Once during each player's turn, if that player has already played a supporter from their hand, they may heal 10 damage from each of their Pokemon. Nope. Still boring. Boomerang Energy is a new special energy card that can be attached to a Pokemon, provides 1 colorless energy, and if this card is discarded by the effect of an attack used by the Pokemon that it is attached to, you attach this card from your discard pile back to the Pokemon. Get it? Like goes to the discard pile and boomerangs back, which is pretty neat. This card could be useful with Pokemon that have attacks that discard energy, but you don't want to discard the energy, then yeah, Boomerang Energy could be pretty good with that. We've had quite a bit of discussion about Jamming Tower, the new stadium card here on the channel, but it's time for my official takes to be laid out. I think Jamming Tower is okay. Now, there are people who think that this card is going to be the Nutter Butters, the craziest stadium ever. I think it's just all right. Removing tool cards is stronger than maybe preventing them with a stadium. Now, Jamming Tower does have the benefit of the fact that there are just not a lot of crazy strong stadiums in Standard right now. So it's possible that if you play a lot of Jamming Tower, that your opponent just might not be able to counter Jamming Tower, rendering all of their tools useless. But if Jamming Tower is competing for space in decks with cards like Lost Vacuum, I think that Lost Vacuum is just a strictly stronger card. Sending tool cards and stadium cards to the Lost Zone, it's a more flexible, stronger effect than just maybe preventing the effect of a tool card with your stadium card. But some decks will be looking to save space and maybe need a stadium counter and then also need to be denying tool cards at the same time. And Jamming Tower does provide that effect. Jamming Tower is essentially a reprint of Lysander Labs, and Lysander Labs was similarly just an okay stadium. It saw some play. It didn't see nearly as much play as Field Blower, which has a very extensive results page. Lysander Labs has some finishes and was played for some time. And I think that Jamming Tower will probably have a similar place in Standard format. It'll see some play and pop up in some decks during its Standard legality, but it will always pale in comparison to a card like Lost Vacuum, which kind of just proactively deals with the problematic tool when it is played. Just like Temple of Sinnoh is all right. It turns off special energy. I think that Enhanced Hammer is a stronger card than Temple of Sinnoh. And if you want to remove special energy, Enhanced Hammer will be a stronger way to do that than Temple of Sinnoh going forward, now that Enhanced Hammer is getting a reprint. The other added benefit of cards like Lost Vacuum and Enhanced Hammer over Jamming Tower and Temple of Sinnoh is that item cards can be easily searched out of the deck with Arven, while stadium cards are less easy to search out in Standard format right now. You pretty much have to draw into them or seek them out with a card like Pidgeot EX's Quick Search. So Jamming Tower's okay. Yeah, it'll see some play, but it's not going to be in every deck. It's just an all right card. Okay. Oh, and that's it. Whoo-wee! Twilight Masquerade. The set comes out on May 24th and will be the newest Pokemon TCG set legal for the North American International Championships. I'm really excited about how Twilight Masquerade is going to mix up the metagame. Let me know your takes on some of your favorite new cards in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the video, sub to the channel, and check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/TrickyJim, where I'm actually streaming live and losing my voice right now as I do this set review. It's been a lot of fun having the Twitch audience kind of bounce ideas off me as we kind of all do this review together. It's been a good time. Thank you for watching. Check out the Twitch channel. Have a good day. See ya.